Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Buckeye Breakdown. We are just 3 days away from Ohio State's delayed home opener, the start of the Big Ten football season. Super exciting. And we are talking today with former Buckeye coach Bill Conley, Justin Holbrook, our digital sports reporter, and sports director Jared Smalley, and me, Christine Barconi. Thank you guys so much for watching today. What's up, guys?
Hi.
Excited?
It's been too long. Let's go.
It has been. You know how bored we've been? Bill and I have been filling our endless
yourself.
conversations. Well, Bill and I have been filling our endless conversations talking about hair products, styles and tie knots, what's going to be new and fashionable in 2020. And there's a simple reminder of what's new and fashionable in 2020, sweatpants.
Fair.
Can I tell them I have Ugg boots on right now?
No, wait.
I'm not showing. That would be unladylike.
A fair point.
What makes you think I have sweatpants on?
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, why wouldn't you?
You're in your home office, dude.
That's true.
No judgment zone here. It's like a Planet Fitness.
So anyway, Saturday, super exciting game happening. I think if they were playing anybody, it would be a super exciting game. But they are the Nebraska Cornhuskers are coming to town.
Yep.
What can we look forward to, Jer?
Well, and I'm gonna set you up a little bit with just what I think 2020 is going to vaguely look like here. I think you're going to see an experienced football team at Ohio State struggle with early on. I think you'll probably hear some. You'll probably see some hurdles they'll have to cross, in large part because of all of the buildup. It's almost been too long, and there's going to be some rust they got to knock off. They haven't played a real football game since the end of December of last year, and until 3 weeks ago, they hadn't tackled anybody in nearly 10 months. So I think there's rust to be knocked off, and I know Coach Conley, when we were talking about that before, it's just I wonder how that will manifest on the field. I think the biggest concern, if you watch college football across the country right now, is just simply tackling. And I think that's the element that I would be concerned about as you go into the new season. That's not for Ohio State, but for everybody.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think your normal sharpness and things like that, your techniques have to really be polished up on in-game situations. And that's something they really haven't been able to do yet. Yeah.
Justin, what are your thoughts about the fact that they return so much experience, in particular, every linebacker's back and, pretty much the whole offensive line is back, or guys that have played a lot. I mean, experience isn't really a huge concern, but there's a couple of places in particular where experience is a major concern. For example, safety. It's some guys that have just frankly not played very much.
Yeah, I think with experience becomes an ability to communicate better. So the guys that haven't played as much, they're going to benefit from the guys that have. So, say you have a Josh Proctor or a Marcus Hooker, at least for them, they have, Sevyn Banks, and they also have like a Sean Wade. So they can rely on those guys that have seen playing experience, and they can communicate with them efficiently. Whereas, maybe you have an entire secondary or an entire offensive line that's young. But with this offensive line, you've got 3 studs on the offensive line and 2 new guys. And those new guys are going to benefit. So there's positions where, like you said, maybe there is a little bit of inexperience, but with that comes a guy maybe right next to them on their right or on their left. I don't know how the camera's facing with this Zoom. But either way, they're going to benefit from that experience of having guys that are next to them in the wings that have been there before.
That's a fair point. So, Christine, obviously the format of the show is pretty simple. People can ask us questions. Yes. How do they do it?
So if you are watching on Twitter, send Jared a tweet. That's his favorite place to be.
Tweet at me.
Tweet at Jared. Tweet at Justin. You can tweet at me, I suppose. I will make sure I check and see. But Facebook, here on Facebook. So we are live right now on NBC4 Eyes Facebook page, as well as Jared's sports page and Justin's sports page as well, and mine too. So you can ask us questions there. You can ask anything you want. They won't give you a score prediction, but I will. I am allowed to do that.
Oh, yeah, there's nothing legally that's against any of us doing that.
I know, but I just learned last year that Justin's like, you do it. I'm like, okay.
That's right. Hey, you do it. Whatever.
Okay.
So I guess one of the
it's like going off of someone's test. You want to hear what they say
exactly right. Yep. I'm a known cheater in school, so I'm very familiar with that concept. I want to ask you. I want to ask all of you a thought about what you think Saturday is going to be like. And Bill, I know we've talked about this. Christine, as a student at Ohio State, you went to a ton of Ohio State games. I'm just wondering how weird you think this dynamic is going to be on Saturday. 1,600 people total in the building. That includes players. It just, ambient noise pumped in. There's so many weird elements. Cardboard fans.
Yeah, I mean,
how's this going to be?
I mean, I certainly think it's going to be weird, especially inside the stadium. The ambient noise will help. I mean, honestly, watching other games, watching the Notre Dame game last week and other SEC games that have been playing, they have a little bit of fans, so it's weird. Yeah, it's definitely quieter in there, and we're going to see that. But outside the stadium, I hope it's even more weird, because I hope people are heeding the advice of Ohio State officials and the medical professionals by not gathering in more than bigger than groups of 10.
Yeah, don't show up. Basically, don't show up.
Exactly.
That's the easy solution.
I guess the simple answer is I want it to be weird outside the stadium, just for the health and safety of Columbus in the state of Ohio. Hang out outside. We're still gonna have nice weather.
That's a good take.
Outside your house.
Yeah, that's right. Hang outside your own house.
I mean, it's gonna be weird for us too.
Sure.
Just Justin and I and Coach, we're not gonna be at the game. It'll just be you. We're all super jealous. I mean, if you come down with something, are we gonna draw short straws? Or
wow, what happened there?
What?
That got weird.
I'm kidding.
Hey, Bill, but we were talking about this last week about, this is something that will affect football teams as they come out, especially teams like Ohio State and Nebraska, who play in front of giant crowds everywhere they go. How long of an effect do you think that has on the game? Is it deep into the game, or is it over in a couple of plays?
I think for a football player that's in the action, that it's only a few plays. But, it's going to be different. There's not going to be the greatest band in the land there, and there's not going to be cheerleaders. Brutus, he's got to take a hiatus, so we don't know where he's going to be hanging out. So that's different. But I think it's the advantage goes in that situation to the visiting team, who normally, the crowd really can get into, especially in crucial situations. There will not be that crowd there unless they can really crank up the volume real loud on third down or something like that. I think it's a little advantage for the visiting team. But again, talent wins out when it's all said and done in most situations. So different, unique environment for the players playing on the field. After a few plays, they'll get into it.
Justin, one of the interesting elements of that is obviously of the few people who are going to be in the building, it's parents. But we've even talked to, some of our staff has even talked to parents this week who don't want to go talk to their kid after the game. Because they don't want to risk putting them in an uncomfortable situation, as they're obviously trying to take all of these significant steps to avoid exposure to COVID-19. How awkward will that be for family members who get in the building, but they're still distant from their own kid?
Obviously awkward, but I think at the end of the day, what they wanted was for a chance for their son to have a season and to see them play that season, whether that be in person or on TV. I don't think they really cared, because when they were, protesting outside of Indianapolis and when they were outside of the Horseshoe, all they said was, I just want my kid to have a chance to play football and be with their friends. So at the end of the day, it's nice that they can be there. And I think they didn't even know that they were going to do that in the first place. They didn't know that they were going to have that opportunity. So to maybe not be able to see their kid after the game, not as big of a deal as not having a season as a totality. I think the weirdest thing will be for football fans who don't come for football. They love the skull session. They love the band. They come for the atmosphere, for the environment, to be around everybody. And to not have that will be the weirdest thing for people that maybe aren't like us, aren't football centric, and they maybe don't care as much about the action on the field. Of course, they cheer for the Buckeyes and want them to win, but they love everything that comes around a game day, and that's what we're going to miss the most.
And that's a really, really astute point about the culture of Ohio State. It's not just playing, football games. Obviously, they win the football game more often than not, and that's a nice feature of it. But to a lot of people, I consider it like going to Saturday church. It's like and there's a structure to the mass, if you will. The band comes in, you rise for the alma mater, you listen to the national anthem, you watch them dot the I. It has a structure like church. And we're sort of breaking that structure in 2020 and basically scrapping it down to, we're playing football here. Coach, let's talk about Ohio State entering the season. We talked last night on the air about the offensive line coming in. We can talk. We know Justin Fields, and we know the run. Like, we know what their skill is outside. But Coach, I have a feeling that this offensive line that's getting ready to suit up for Ohio State this year, it might be. I don't want to put a lot of heaping pressure on this, but it might be as good an offensive line as they've had there in decades.
Yeah, very possible. I mean, look at the situation. Not only they're athletic, they're big. Every offensive lineman, starting at the center, guard, and tackle spots, they're all over 300 pounds, and they're athletic. Nebraska has one guy on their front that's over 300 pounds, so they can be a dominant offensive line. And like you said, the depth is there. Even the guys that weren't starters got a lot of repetitions. That's something Justin mentioned. And so, you can do a lot of things when you have time to protect your quarterback and when you can open up big holes for your offensive running backs.
Yeah. And Justin, you were mentioning that a moment ago about experienced players around you. Thayer Munford was speaking to media just a short time ago, within the past hour. And he said last year he played at around 70 to 80% because of his back injury from a year ago. He hadn't really been able to train, hadn't been able to lift weights, especially at the heavy levels that you need to play at the strength you want to play to powerhouse against some defensive linemen. He says he's going to be miles better than he was last year. Can't wait for people to see him. And he flat out said our offensive line is going to be the best in the country. And I imagine a little bit of what you said there. You've kind of got new starter in between veteran guy. It's kind of a unique situation there.
Yeah, I think very much so. And to hit on your first point, I'd hate to see what 100% Thayer looks like. I mean, that's kind of terrifying, right? It reminds you a little bit of J.K. Dobbins after a Wisconsin game. He rushes for upwards of 180 yards, and he says, that was a B- for me.
Mm-hmm.
I hate to see what an A looked like. The same thing
Yeah.
Thayer saying, he was at 70% last year. He was a pretty good 70% player. So, yeah, I think the benefit is what we had been alluding to, is that you're going to have these veteran guys next to these guys that maybe don't have as much experience. So say a guy like, a Harry Miller maybe misses one assignment there at left guard. He's got Mumford right there on his left that can probably clean that up for him. And it won't be seen as a mistake in the middle of the game, and they could probably make a big play out of it because you're going to have a guy that's been there before, and he knows not only his assignment, but also the assignment of all the guys around him. Same with Josh Myers, and it's the same thing with Wyatt Davis, obviously a first-team All-American. And I think that kind of stems from every position on the field, from wide receivers like Chris Olave, and you have other guys that can learn from him. So it's not just one position. It's really the entire team, maybe except for defensive tackle, but that's maybe it.
Mm-hmm. Let's get into defense a little bit here. And we're going to take your questions here in just a second, and then we'll also get into a little bit of a look ahead at Nebraska here. So we're going to cover all those bases, and I know Christine's working on the questions right now. Coach, let me come to you about defense. Justin just alluded to it. Defensive tackle, the unfortunate injury to Haskell Garrett in the offseason, it appears that we're not sure that he's going to be available on Saturday. Frankly, I would call that doubtful. From what we understand, it might be hard to get him on the field Saturday. Teron Vincent coming back from a shoulder injury from a year ago. He is still not back 100% from what we understand. So the depth at that position is a little lacking, but the guys who are available there are extremely talented. Tommy Togiai, for example, he's played a lot of football since his freshman year at OSU. So otherwise, they've got an All-American at cornerback. They've got 86 combined starts at linebacker returning, and you've got 2 5-star defensive ends, Jonathan Cooper and Zach Harrison. I think you're feeling pretty comfortable with that, right?
I'm never uncomfortable unless you're a good solid 2 deep on the defensive line. You need bodies. You really do. And let's face it, what does Nebraska do well? Run the football. And they got an experienced offensive linebacker. It's one of those situations we cannot let them establish a running attack. They want to keep the ball away from us. They want to keep the ball away from the explosive Ohio State offense. So what do? Try to establish your running game. So those guys, Tommy T and those guys, are really going to have to anchor down, especially against the run inside. And then when it comes to passing situation, guys like Jonathan Cooper, guys like Tyler Friday, Zach Harrison, those guys got to lay their ears back and get after it.
Yeah, Antoine Jackson's going to be the other defensive tackle that I think people have not seen very much of. And I think you're going to see a lot of him on Saturday. as Coach
Yeah,
alluded
maybe
to.
look for this Ty Hamilton kid, the freshman.
Yeah.
I like him.
Yeah.
He might see some action.
And, it's interesting is Ty kind of came to Ohio State as a defensive end, but, his older brother was an outstanding defensive tackle, and it would not make it would make a lot of sense, frankly, for him to step inside their play 3 technique, bulk up a little bit. They've loved him early on. So, yeah, I could see that certainly being an option for him. All right, Christine.
I have questions. Most of our viewers right now are just saying go Buckeyes, except Donald, who's trolling and saying go Huskers. But thanks for watching and for the engagement, Donald. That's okay. Mike, hey, thank you so much for watching. Sharon, you too. I have a question for you, Coach Jared, Justin. So the big names that stick out to you, and I start learning these names once the games start, Wyatt Davis, Chris Olave, Justin Fields, Sean Wade, Jonathan Cooper. I recognize all these big names from last year and in years past. Who's going to be some other new names that are going to stand out this year that we're going to say, oh yep, recognize that name? And then my favorite thing is to watch them go on to the NFL, be watching a random NFL game, and I'll say, oh, he used to be a Buckeye. I've heard his name 1,000 times.
That's a great question. Coach, let's start on the offense. Any newcomer you think on offense makes sense there to talk about?
Yeah, I think one thing which we've got to do is you want to keep fresh receivers into the game. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of guys. Julian Fleming is a guy who's had a really good camp, looking really good. Talk about Jackson Smith.
Njigba. Yep, that's him.
And Mookie Cooper. Those are 3 guys right there. I think we'll see some action. It may probably or on a Saturday in their first game in Ohio Stadium.
Yeah. Justin, anybody else offensively stand out from a newcomer standpoint?
I think just Guy Scott, just to throw a name in there for a wide receiver standpoint. And then he's not new, but Garrett Wilson will come onto the scene this year in the same way that Chris Olave did last year. And then new, as in new to Ohio State, Trey Sermon. He's going to split a lot of carries with Master Teague. They're going to rely on that running attack a lot, especially behind that veteran offensive line. So you'll see that transfer come over and Trey Sermon, and he'll make an impact right away.
Very good point there, because you're going to have basically a dual back situation. Both Trey Sermon and Master Teague are going to get the ball a lot. And I also think the Garrett Wilson thing is interesting because Garrett Wilson's moving inside this year, and it's surprising because a lot of people don't look at him as because of his build. He's kind of slight. He's not a big guy. And wonder how he's going to fare in the slot. And the problem is that linebackers and guys that are playing over the middle, not playing outside, cannot cover him. They cannot run with him. And so he's going to run wild across the middle of the field. Remember the Michigan game last year? All he did was run crossing patterns. And Justin Fields threw about 10-yard passes, and he went for about 45, 50. And I think that's going to be the problem for defenses with Garrett moving inside and them having enough depth out there. That's my curiosity at receiver. And then also Nicholas Petit-Frere at tackle. We've seen him play a little bit. Y'all, he's 315 pounds. He came to Ohio State at about 265.
Oh, my gosh.
He's been eating like a 5,000 calorie a day diet. When he went home during the quarantine, his mom enforced it. The coaches didn't have to. His mom did.
Wait, I want to be friends with his mom.
I mean, his mom,
like
it was like, you remember Everybody Loves Raymond? How his mom made everybody eat something. Eat something. That was his mom. And it might be the thing that makes him a star at Ohio State. So, it's interesting how guys find their way to stardom.
Sounds like a dream.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, really, it just sounds like a dream.
And so, Christine, you asked a question about newcomers.
Yeah.
I think the curiosity is on defense.
Okay.
Because, and I'll get your take on this, Bill, because the safety position, I don't think Ohio State fans knew what they had in Jordan Fuller till he was gone. And they saw him in the NFL playing for the Rams and kicking butt, and suddenly realized, oh, he did a lot of things for OSU from an alignment standpoint. They play that single high safety defense, and basically they'll play with one safety on the field is what that roughly means. And he shouldered a lot of responsibility that somebody else is going to have to pick up.
Yeah, and the only guy really that has a lot of playing time, a lot of snaps is Sean Wade back there.
Yeah. In
terms of being a full-time starter. We got some guys that obviously have a lot of talent. But again, there's nothing like playing experience. And so much of that position, the secondary, is so important because you can't – it's kind of like a long snapper. You're not noticed a lot until you make a mistake.
Yeah.
Same thing's true with them. To let a receiver get behind them or miss a tackle in the open field. Those guys have not only be great pass defenders, but have to be able to tackle in space.
Yeah.
and also be major contributors on special teams and the coverage units. So, those positions, Ohio State has done a great job, Jared, of recruiting what I call the athlete category. Guys that can play multiple positions, but mainly have great skill, have great agility, versatility, mobility, and can make plays in space.
Yeah, the guys be earning their scholarship, no doubt, this year, doing a lot of different things. Christine, any other questions before we move on to Nebraska?
I have another question.
Yeah, fire.
I want to know what the playoffs are going to look like. Is there going to be a Big Ten championship this year? How's the playoff rankings going to go? Have we heard from ESPN and the committee this year? What's that going to look like?
Yeah, so this is an interesting point, and it's one of those cart before the horse things. I think this is a season, Bill and Justin, that you better take it from a 1 week perspective. And I don't just mean that from the cold coach speak, we got to play them as they come kind of thing. I mean it from, guys, this virus is serious, and it is costing teams games in both the major college level and the NFL. And if you don't take extraordinary precaution, it can wipe out not only a game, but when we're talking about eligibility for the college football playoff, if you lose games and you're only scheduled to play 8, that's not very much of a resume. Even if you're really good in 5 or 6 games, it may not be enough of a resume to get to the playoff. Now, I think Ohio State has enough of a reputation that if that were to unfortunately happen, if that did, and they play well, maybe that's enough. But I think it's just such an uncertainty about how it's going to go, and if there's going to be a title game and how all that's going to work. I think if form holds, I think it's plenty. With 9 games, including a championship game, to get where they need to go. But Bill, I don't know. I mean, clearly that's their objective to get there, but it just seems like it's a year of just, we'll take it as it comes.
Yeah, and the unfortunate thing, if a player has to miss because of it's like 21 days, that they'll be out. And so you can't afford to have multiple guys, obviously, have that happen. And again, because we've had a more limited schedule than, for example, the Southeast Conference, it's important to get every win under your belt to have an opportunity to make a playoff situation. Yeah.
And Justin, when you think about the rankings, I'm wondering what this committee is going to do from an evaluation standpoint. They have seen nearly 2 months of some leagues playing football, like the ACC, and obviously some of the smaller conferences across the country. But when they start the voting process, they'll have seen maybe a couple weeks of Big Ten football and Pac-12 football. So your teams like Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, Oregon, those schools, they're not going to be able – they're just not comparable resumes at that point. It's going to be a hard thing to figure out.
Yeah, I think it's going to come down to teams usually worried about maybe a 1 loss or 2 loss to get into the playoff. Now it's going to be – we're first off worried about, missing a game because of the virus.
Yeah.
So your first focus is not losing the game. It's, being able to play it in the first place. And then you go from there. For Ohio State, 1 loss, that might be it. You look at teams in the SEC, they have 1 loss, they had a longer season. Are they going to take into account that, Georgia lost to Alabama and Ohio State maybe had a one-off loss to one of the teams on the schedule, like a Michigan State, and they say, well, Georgia lost to Alabama. They only played, they played more games than Ohio State did. Does that have more value, or do they look at from strictly a talent standpoint and say, these are going to be the best 4 teams for the college football playoff, regardless of how many games were played? So that's going to be the interesting thing to see, is how much of a premium is put on the number of games played versus quality that you played in the games that you actually had and had a chance to play. So, I mean, it's just something that we don't know yet. But what we do know is that no team with 2 losses has ever made the playoffs. So that's your first barometer right there. But 8 games, you're probably not worried about that if you're a premium team like Ohio State, Penn State.
Mm-hmm.
Jared, logistically, we got to wrap things up with the guys on Zoom. We are running out of time unless we can convince them to upgrade us to pro within the next 6 minutes here.
Well, I tell you what,
we can talk about just what our game plan is for on Saturday.
Yep, perfect.
All right. Hey, guys, thank you so much. Justin and Coach Conley, will be hearing a lot more from you guys here coming up soon. Thanks for being with us today.
Sure thing. Go Bucks.
Go Bucks.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
We'll see you Saturday.
All right, Jared, switching cameras here. Let's talk about Saturday. We have a lot going on and leading up to the game as well. What's our game plan look like here?
It's interesting because, you have a completely different game day than we've ever experienced at Ohio State. So what we're going to be doing is completely different than what we've ever had to do. you know, and you feel for the businesses in the area around the stadium that are basically depending on game day crowds to survive, and a lot of them make their entire budget for a year based on the 6 or 7 home games, and that's just not going to be the same this year, and it shouldn't be. That's what Ohio State's asking people to do. So Saturday morning, all morning long, we'll have coverage live, both here in the station, and then we'll be down at the stadium as we get closer to kickoff, and we'll just show you how weird it is, quite frankly. I mean, how empty the parking lots are, and how different a vibe it is around an Ohio State game. And then obviously Saturday after the game, the beautiful thing is, we have an opportunity to come right on. So at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, Pepsi Sports Saturday, 7:30, we have a complete breakdown of what happened in game 1. And we'll be able to kind of digest it a little bit, look around the country, see what's happening. And it will be, it's just, there are no degrees of uniqueness. But if there were, this would be the most unique in Ohio Stadium history, just because you're going to have virtually nobody there.
No band, no cheerleaders.
No band.
Just a handful of parents and
a lot of
media. Cardboard
cutouts, and that's what it is. The other thing that's interesting is just if you're going to be watching just from Nebraska's standpoint, Nebraska was 5-7 a year ago. They were not great in the Big Ten. They had some significant issues on offense. Adrian Martinez is the quarterback again. He was the quarterback last year. A lot was expected of him a year ago, and it didn't go well. He threw for 10 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, less than 2,000 passing yards. They were not a high octane offense. However, they return pretty much everybody. I think they returned 10 starters on offense, and I think the whole offensive line is back.
That's impressive.
So they have experience, and I don't think that they will be. Certainly, the crowd element will not be a factor. There's no crowd.
Mm-hmm.
And they will not be, shaken in their boots to come into Ohio Stadium.
Right.
Now, are they good enough at football to hang with the Buckeyes? That's debatable, and chances are probably not.
What was the score last year?
Last year they won by 41. It was a 48-7 game in Lincoln, and it was worse than that, frankly. That first half, the second quarter was awful in terms of a Nebraska standpoint. They could do nothing. And demoralizing. Second half, Ohio State had completely taken it off the gas, and other than the first drive of the third quarter. And, it was as one-sided and dominant a performance in a prime-time atmosphere on national TV as you could get. It was not good. And the Nebraska brand got hurt that night. It had been hurting for a while, and that was a big step back. This is a new season, a new opportunity for them to start building back up. And obviously, if they perform well in Ohio Stadium, they're 26-point underdogs. Frankly, I'm surprised it's not a bigger spread than that when you consider what Ohio State is returning. So, maybe the first game will be a little bit of a chess match. Nobody's seen tape of anybody. Look, Ohio State's going to run their offense, right? They're going to turn around and hand the football off. They're going to run, some basic tree routes. It's going to be Justin Fields distributing and occasionally running. You know what it is.
Yeah.
The question is, can you do anything to stop it? And that'll be answered Saturday.
All right, Jared, thank you so much. We'll see you. Are you going to be in the Forum?
I think every TV show that we have.
That's what I thought. Well,
and even some that we don't.
Well,
I'll be appearing on, for example, this is not on television.
No.
But we're here because it's,
Buckeyes.
It's pretty much. And it feels good to say that.
Yeah.
So it's pretty exciting.
I was skipping around singing some songs before we came on the air. You watched it. It was a thing.
It was awesome. I mean, the Ugg boot falls arrived. I'm with you. No, I hear you. I'm in support of the boots. I am not a hater.
I mean, it's a little warm for them, but it's fine.
Well, you're indoors, yeah, and the temperature I believe is 68 degrees in here, 70 degrees.
It's frigid in here.
So that's okay.
Anyway.
Right. Oh, this got weird.
Watch Jared at 4, 5, and 6. I'll be on at 4 o'clock as well. Tomorrow, big day. I have a live interview with Ohio State Athletic Director Gene Smith.
Very
I will
cool.
be live at 10 a.m.
Yep.
That'll be really cool. And then make sure you tune in for our special Saturday show leading up to the game. We will be wall-to-wall Buckeyes in that as well. Audrey has an awesome story coming up with some Ohio State football parents. Jared talked about it a little bit earlier. Can't wait to hear about that. And then we will have some footage on Saturday also on a digital exclusive, kind of an extended interview with those parents as well, because they're they're jazzed, but again, it's weird.
It's so strange. But at least they're in the building, and that was not a guarantee. That was not a guarantee. So at least there's a win for them to get to see their kids play.
All right, guys. Every game is a home game. If you're watching the Buckeyes this weekend, please don't gather in large groups per medical professional guidelines. Ohio State is requesting that as well. Just be safe out there. We are still in the middle of a pandemic. It is very serious. So just one last push for that before we get off these airwaves. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you in an hour and a half. Bye.